There's a specific type of person whose brain works completely different from most people, and psychology has finally figured out exactly what makes them tick. Deep thinkers process the world in ways that seem almost alien to others. Their minds don't just scratch the surface. They dig deeper, question harder, and see patterns that most people completely miss. But here's the thing. Most deep thinkers go through life feeling misunderstood, like something's wrong with them, when really their brain is just wired to operate on a totally different system. So, what actually separates a deep thinker from everyone else? According to psychology, there are specific traits that show up again and again. Let's break down the psychology behind people who think deeper than most. Number 1. They use System 2 thinking way more than others. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman discovered something huge about how humans think. He found that we basically have two systems running in our heads. System 1 is fast, automatic, and runs on gut feelings. System 2 is slow, careful, and analytical. Most people lean heavily on System 1 because it's easier and takes less energy. But deep thinkers, they're constantly engaging System 2. Instead of accepting their first instinct, they question it. They break down their automatic responses and examine whether they actually make sense. This is why deep thinkers take longer to form opinions. They're not being stubborn or slow. Their brain is literally doing more work, checking and rechecking conclusions before settling on an answer. Research shows this type of thinking involves the prefrontal cortex, the newer parts of our brain that handle complex reasoning. When a deep thinker analyzes a problem, they're breaking it into pieces, understanding how each part works and seeing how everything connects. This gives them a better ability to understand what caused something in the past and predict what might happen in the future. Think of it like this. Most people's brains are like someone flipping through a book, glancing at the pictures and headlines. A deep thinker's brain is reading every single word, taking notes in the margins, and cross-referencing it with 5 other books they read last year. Same book, completely different experience. But this intense processing comes with a cost that most people never see coming, which brings us to the next trait. Number 2, they get lost in thought constantly. Ever catch someone staring off into space and assume they're just spacing out? There's actually something way more interesting happening in their brain. A study from Georgia Tech in 2017 found that people who daydream and get lost in thought frequently often have higher working memory capacity. Translation: their brain can juggle multiple complex thoughts at the same time. Deep thinkers aren't absent-minded because they're dumb or unfocused. Their mind is genuinely busy working on multiple problems, exploring scenarios, and connecting ideas. Another study published in Psychological Science backed this up. It turns out that mind wandering is linked to higher degrees of working memory, meaning these people's brains are actually more active, not less. Here's a real example that shows just how extreme this can get. There's this famous story about Isaac Newton. One day he was so deep in thought about a physics problem that he actually forgot to eat for an entire day. When someone finally brought him food, he ate it without even looking at it, still completely absorbed in solving equations in his head. His friends had to literally remind him to do basic human things because his mind was so locked into deep analysis. This is also why deep thinkers can seem forgetful about everyday stuff, like where they put their keys or what day it is. So much of their mental energy is devoted to big ideas and complex problems that smaller details get pushed aside. It's not carelessness, it's just how their brain allocates resources. But being lost in thought is only part of the picture. When deep thinkers actually pay attention to the outside world, something incredible happens. Number 3, they're extremely observant. Deep thinkers don't just look at things, they really see them. They pick up on small details that other people completely miss. The change in someone's expression during a conversation, the pattern in how events unfold, the subtle connections between ideas that seem unrelated. Research published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found something interesting. Being highly observant actually connects to having greater empathy. Deep thinkers use their observation skills to understand how other people feel and think. They're reading body language, noticing tone shifts, catching the things left unsaid. This observation skill lets them see patterns and relationships that aren't obvious. They might connect a concept from science to something in philosophy, or spot similarities between a historical event and something happening right now. Their brain is constantly making these connections because they're taking in so much information and processing it deeply. I'll be honest, this is something that personally cost me friendships when I was younger. I'd notice when people said one thing, but their face showed something else. I'd point out inconsistencies in what someone told me versus what they did. I thought I was being helpful, catching these details, but people don't always want to be seen that clearly. Sometimes they prefer the surface version of themselves, and having someone constantly see through it made them uncomfortable. It took me years to learn that just because you see something doesn't mean you need to say it. This intense observation feeds into something even more essential that deep thinkers need to function properly. Number 4, they need solitude to recharge. Here's something most people get wrong. When a deep thinker wants to be alone, it's not because they're antisocial or depressed. Solitude is literally how they recharge and process everything. Psychology research shows that solitude can spark creativity and help with problem solving, both things deep thinkers excel at. In those quiet moments alone, they can dive into their thoughts without distraction, explore new ideas, and make sense of everything they've observed. It's not isolation. It's a necessary space for their mind to work. Many deep thinkers are introverted, which makes sense. Deep thinking isn't a group activity. It requires focus, time, and space away from external noise. Studies show that introverts have higher levels of electrical activity in their brains, which means greater cortical arousal. Their brains are already running hot, so adding too much external stimulation becomes overwhelming. But even deep thinkers who are more extroverted need time to themselves. Not because they dislike people, but because their mind needs quiet to process all the information it's constantly taking in and analyzing. And this need for solitude directly affects how they interact with others, especially in one specific way that drives them absolutely crazy. Number 5, they hate small talk. Small talk feels almost painful to deep thinkers. Conversations about the weather or what someone watched on TV last night don't engage their mind in any meaningful way. It's not that they think they're better than others, it's that surface-level conversation doesn't satisfy the way their brain works. Deep thinkers prefer conversations that actually go somewhere. They want to discuss ideas, explore different perspectives, debate concepts. They'd rather talk about why people believe what they believe than what brand of coffee someone bought. When deep thinkers engage in conversation, they're looking for depth and meaning, not just filling silence. This can make social situations tricky for them. At a party, you'll find them in the corner having an intense one-on-one conversation rather than mingling with the crowd. They're not being snobs. They're just wired to connect through depth rather than breadth. There's actually a fascinating case that demonstrates this perfectly. A researcher named Susan Cain interviewed hundreds of deep thinkers for her book on introversion. One person told her about attending a networking event where everyone was doing the typical surface-level introductions. Name, job, hobbies. This deep thinker couldn't take it anymore and just asked someone straight up, "What's something you believe that most people in this room would disagree with?" The question completely changed the energy. Suddenly, people were having real conversations, sharing actual thoughts. But here's the kicker. Half the room loved it and clustered around this person. The other half thought they were weird and actively avoided them. That's the reality for deep thinkers. Going deep either creates instant connection or instant discomfort. There's rarely an in-between. This pattern of going deep shows up in another area that frustrates everyone around them. Number 6, they take forever to make decisions. If someone asks a deep thinker for an immediate answer, they're probably not getting one. Deep thinkers need time to process information from every angle before committing to a decision. This can frustrate people around them who want quick responses. But here's what's actually happening. The deep thinkers are running through scenarios, considering potential consequences, examining their options from multiple perspectives, and making sure their decision aligns with their values. They're not being difficult, they're being thorough. Carl Jung, the psychologist who founded analytical psychology, said something that explains this perfectly. Deep thinkers look inside themselves when making decisions. They're not just considering external factors, They're checking whether the choice fits with who they are and what they believe. Research backs this up too. Studies show that people who take time to reflect before deciding tend to make better choices long term. Once a deep thinker makes a decision, it's solid. They've examined it from every angle and minimized potential problems. The wait is worth it. But what drives this need to examine everything so thoroughly? The answer reveals something fundamental about how their minds work. Number 7. They're intellectually curious about everything. Deep thinkers have this constant need to understand how things work and why things are the way they are. They're not satisfied with surface-level explanations. If you tell them something is true, they want to know the underlying principles and mechanisms that make it true. This curiosity drives them to read constantly, explore new subjects, and connect dots between different fields of knowledge. They might jump from reading about psychology to physics to history because they're looking for patterns and connections across everything. Psychologists recognize this thirst for knowledge as a sign of deep thinking. It's not about collecting random facts. It's about understanding the deeper connections and principles that tie everything together. The Journal of Research in Personality found that people with high intellectual curiosity and open-mindedness have greater capacity for creative problem solving. And when you combine this endless curiosity with deep analysis, something surprising emerges. Number 8. They're incredibly creative. This might surprise some people, but deep thinkers and creative people share a ton of overlap. Whether it's art, music, writing, or innovative problem solving, deep thinkers excel at creating something new from the information and experiences they already have. Think about Leonardo da Vinci or Albert Einstein. Totally different fields, but both were deep thinkers who used that depth to create groundbreaking work. According to William Byers in his book Deep Thinking, this type of thinking goes beyond just being logical and systematic. It becomes creative, abstract, and non-sequential. Deep thinkers don't just follow step-by-step processes. They make unexpected leaps between ideas, find novel connections, and approach problems from angles nobody else considered. Their creativity comes from the same place as their analytical skills, the ability to see patterns, make connections, and think beyond the obvious. This creative depth also translates into how they connect with other people, which might be their most underestimated strength. Number 9. They're highly empathetic. Because deep thinkers spend so much time observing and analyzing, they develop a strong sense of empathy. They can read emotional cues that others miss. They understand not just what someone is saying, but why they're saying it and how they feel about it. This empathy makes deep thinkers amazing friends and partners when you actually get to know them. They might not be great at small talk or big group settings, but in meaningful one-on-one connections, they really shine. They listen carefully, understand deeply, and offer insights that show they genuinely get what you're going through. Their thoughtful nature means the advice they give is usually well considered and comes from a place of real understanding. They've thought through different perspectives and potential outcomes before even speaking. But this same empathy combined with their analytical mind creates one serious problem. Number 10. They struggle with overthinking. Here's the downside of being a deep thinker. That same brain that's great at analysis and problem solving can also get stuck in loops of overthinking. Psychologists link overthinking directly to deep thinking because the inclination to analyze everything doesn't just shut off. Deep thinkers might replay conversations in their heads for hours, analyzing every word. They might lie awake contemplating decisions or wrestling with complex ideas. The mind that's so good at diving deep can also dive too deep and get lost down there. This overthinking can lead to stress and anxiety. The challenge for deep thinkers is learning to balance their natural tendency to analyze with the need to sometimes just let things be. Not everything needs to be examined from every angle. Sometimes good enough really is good enough, and this is where the most important realization about deep thinkers comes in. But here's what most deep thinkers don't realize. The traits that make them feel weird or broken are actually the same traits that make them innovative problem solvers and creative thinkers. Deep thinkers operate on a different system than most people, and that's not a bad thing. They use System 2 thinking more often, which makes them slower but more thorough. They get lost in thought because their working memory is actively processing multiple ideas. They observe details others miss and use that information to develop empathy and understanding. They need solitude not because they're antisocial, but because their brain needs space to process everything. They hate small talk because they crave meaningful connection and deep conversation. They take time making decisions because they're examining every angle to minimize problems. Their intellectual curiosity drives them to constantly learn and make connections across different fields. This feeds into their creativity, letting them generate innovative solutions and ideas. Their empathy makes them excellent in deep relationships, even if large social gatherings drain them. And yes, they sometimes overthink to the point of stress, but that same analytical mind also gives them the power to understand complex problems that others can't even see. The psychology of deep thinkers shows that their minds aren't broken or wrong. They're just wired differently. And in a world that often values quick thinking and surface-level engagement, deep thinkers bring something incredibly valuable: the ability to see what others miss, solve what others can't, and create what others haven't imagined. If any of this sounds like someone in your life, or maybe even yourself, understand that deep thinking is a strength, not a weakness. It comes with challenges, sure, but it also comes with the ability to contribute something genuinely unique to the world. If this helped you understand deep thinkers better, then subscribe to the channel.